This is a tough one. Had to really get my
Yeah.
emotions in check before I could even come on the show today. And I'm not quite still there, if I'm being perfectly honest. I want to start by just checking in with both of you. How did this land for you? Dr. Hudson, I'll start first with you and then Dr. Opara.
Um, you know, I might be a little numb. And, I'm already resolved, first of all, to the revolution, second of all, to the Exodus, thirdly, to Nazi hunting in all of its forms. So for me, it's just another day. You know what I mean? Like, I don't expect any more, any less from our institutional systems here in America. And I think it's unfortunate, but it didn't hit the same because I might be desensitized right now.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, Dr. Opara, how about you?
Yeah, I can relate to my sister, Dr. Neecey here, Dr. Neecey Hudson. Certainly a degree of numbness. I'm not desensitized. I always try to be stay vigilant, and I believe the sensitization to violence is part of maintaining my humanity. So I allow
Mm,
myself to always be sort of to feel in response to every time that Black bodies are violated. And
Hmm.
so, but I agree, there's definitely still this degree of numbness, and it's a trauma response. It's a trauma response to the, because body remembers, right? We know body keeps the score, and there is a body memory that is personal but also intergenerational, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
sis, you started off referencing lynching, and there's a body memory to that. And the lynching happened on American soil, but happened throughout the diaspora as
Mm.
well. And so, yeah, that response, fight or flight, or it's there's also fawn and freeze. And so the freeze trauma response is a common one that happens with me, and that's what was triggered in the Memphis incident, shall we say?
Mm. Yeah. Dr. Apar, I want to stick with you for just a second because for a lot of people, this raises a whole lot of complexities and intersections. Right now, I know many of us we are very familiar that sometimes black cops be the worst ones. There's a quote circulating from James Baldwin talking about how if you must call an officer, please don't call a black officer because
Mm.
he speaks to the intimacy that black officers have with our community and their ability to cause a particularly depth of hurt that was unmatched even in white on black violence. And again, I've called his name a couple times today. Clay Kane, another host on this channel, played that clip from Boys in the Hood where the black officer is doing the brutalizing, and it's not until they're called away to handle a potential homicide that the black cops brutalization of those black boys ended. And Dr. Apara, for those who perhaps are not as familiar, can you talk with us about how this is an incident, while yes perpetuated on that screen that we saw mainly by black men? I will remind all of you, it wasn't just black men. It was the black men that got first charged and had their names and pictures first released, and they were fired first. Again, affirmative action for blackness in a way that we ain't never seen before. There were also white officers involved whose names are all and faces are now being revealed publicly. But can you talk with us about how this was still a crime rooted in institutional racism, even though the perpetuators were all, at least in that first set of videos, all looked like the very person that they were beating into an anti-black death?
Listen, it is in the same way that black overseers were especially heinous in their violence against their folks when they were overseen on behalf of Mr. Charlie or Master Charlie on the slave plantations, right? We know
Mm.
that there were black people that were put in charge of maintaining the system of slavery, and the way they whipped and the way they executed corporal punishment on other black bodies was especially heinous, and we have those records, we know that. And so there is little to no surprise when we see that white supremacy still can express itself even through black bodies, and it's especially, just like Brother James Baldwin said, heinous because there is this added level of sort of an internalized racism that is taught by the systems and structures of anti-blackness and white supremacy. But then there's, and the way that begins to work to sort of prove, so there's something in the literature called stereotype threats, where those of us that are Black in these space, in predominantly white spaces, because we have internalized the stereotypes of who we are and of Blackness, we are always trying to prove that we're not that, right? And we're always trying to sort of show that no, we bout it, like we're just like you, we're not like them. No, those other Negroes, that's not me. That's not us, right? And how do I demonstrate and prove that I can be, a part of the good old boys crew that, yeah, except for how I look, but trust me, I think and I act just like you, Mr. Charlie. It's okay. Is to show that I can destroy my own brother or my own sister. And all these are happening some degree consciously, but a lot of ways subconsciously. Right? Because if we went and talked to one of those brothers in blue, so to speak, to say, hey, did you act out the way that you did out of internalized racism and internalized white supremacy and internalized anti-Blackness? I'm pretty sure they'll be like, no, he was doing this and that. So this is not always acting on or working on a conscious level. But listen, we see it in Black police officers, baby. We see it in Black doctors. We see it in some, Black doctors. We see it in some Black teachers.
Did she do that?
Yes,
Did she do it?
I did it. Black teachers. Okay, we see it in Black social workers, baby. We are all internalized. We all internalized and are conditioned inside this system of white supremacy and systemic structural anti-Blackness. And then if we are not always doing the work of deconditioning and unlearning these things about ourselves, we are becoming a medium, a vessel, a vehicle of these structural systems in our roles and positions in society. So whether you're a police officer, you're a doctor, you're a teacher, this, that, and the third, just because this skin is melanated doesn't mean the mindset or the spirit or the heart has been emancipated. And so it becomes really critical that we are understanding that we can also be victims of white supremacy and vehicles for white supremacy despite our skin tone if we haven't emancipated our minds, our souls, and our spirits. And I believe this is part of what we saw in this last with this incident and this last couple of weeks.
In case y'all didn't go to church yesterday. In case you didn't go to church yesterday.
I need a moment. Okay. Let us sit in this for just a second. I sometimes have to stop myself from rushing on to the next point. Can we sit here for just a moment? Because now that all the hair on my head, my locks, I think my locks stood up. The hair on the back of my neck is up. The hair on my arms is standing straight up. Let us have a conversation about this particular point right here. We all have the capacity, if it is unchecked, to engage in some of the most anti-Black behaviors, Dr. Opara? Is that what I hear you saying? That as a result of being conditioned and being trained to see Black lives as less valuable, white people have a particular response, but Black people can also have a response? Could that be perhaps why we see no problem with... Let me pause there. Let me just ask that question first. And I just want to make sure I heard this correctly, because it seems to me that would explain a whole lot of the sabotage that it seems that we see in a variety of spaces. Because, yeah, I want a Black doctor, but I don't have a bad one. Okay. I want Black teachers, but I had to damn near shut down the school for a Black teacher who was trying to destroy my Black child's mental well-being. So okay, I feel us having that conversation. Is that really what you're suggesting? I just want to make sure I'm following you closely.
Sister Lurie, this is a conversation that we don't want to have in our community.
Let's have it though.
Okay.
Let's have
this is a conversation. Folks don't want to go there with that, but we have to have it, because when we don't have it, we have what happened with Brother Tyre, and that's the one we know we're talking about on a platform, that's elevated. Keep in mind that if we have that example, we have hundreds of examples that just didn't see the light of the media. So so you are absolutely right. And you know what? The ancestors knew that. That's why we have this saying: not all skin folk are what? Kinfolk. Right? So the ancestors knew that. This is not new information. I'm saying nothing new. I wish I could claim the brilliance, but our ancestors knew that. And that's why we have that saying. But the mechanism, the what we call in medicine, we say the pathogenesis, the pathophysiology. Meaning the ways in which, right, the thing is working in for us is a little different than in whiteness because of the construction of blackness inside of white supremacy. And so somebody will say, I don't understand, how did like three white people, how did they manage the entire South? Well, yeah, because part of white supremacy and the violence of it is the psychological warfare to teach the folks that you are not good enough, and you have to believe that, and then you can help us to enforce this social order that we're trying to establish inside of white and anti-blackness. So you need the people that you are violating and oppressing, you need some of them to buy into their own oppression. You need that in order to establish the system. And so absolutely, it is by intention and design. And I'm going to sort of paraphrase, but while Sister Neecey is responding, I will look up the exact quote, but I believe this is from Uncle Dr. Henry McLeod, but I'll find it exactly. But he said something to that nature that you need, right, folks, if you can enslave our minds, you don't need physical chains. You can just use the mental and spiritual chains to enslave a person and make them believe that they're not good enough. You tell them they don't have culture. You tell them they don't have language. You tell them they don't have science. They don't have math, and they came from nothing, and they required whiteness to be something, and they believe it. You don't need nothing else, because they will do the work for you. So yes, Sister Lurie, we are all susceptible on the conscious and subconscious, because you have brothers especially being out here be like, not me, while steady perpetuating the same thing we just talked about, particularly when you bring in the intersectionality of gender. I don't know if we're ready for that conversation on today, but you have that happening. And so you have to understand that it is on a conscious and subconscious level, but the issue is the impact. What is the impact at the end of the day? So yes, there were 5 black cops, and of course, as we know, there were other white cops and other folks, but 5 black men, pillars of society, so to speak, our fathers and brothers and cousins and kin, were, totally participated in this heinous act. But understand that it was through this complex and yet simple mechanism of the structural, systemic white supremacy and anti-blackness, the machinery of it, that has been conditioning and teaching us that we are less than and we're not human. And if we are not doing the daily work of healing, because we are all victims of this, and survivors, I like to say, rather than victims of the trauma of this violence throughout multiple generations. If we are not doing the daily work of healing, unlearning, and deconditioning and reconditioning and relearning who we are, why we are, to love and value who I am in the mirror, and therefore my brother, my sister, my kin, then yes, we will participate in that structure, depending on what role or position we play in society. Whether you're a doctor, you're a police officer, you're a judge, you're a prison warden, you're a bus driver, or you're a stay-at-home parent.
Speaking of prison wardens, one of the cops. Oh, sorry.
Those are what we call shots fired. Dr. Hudson, I want to get to this quote that I think may speak to what Dr. Opara was saying. Dr. Carter G. Woodson said, the so-called modern education, with all its defects, does others so much more good than it does the black. I say black instead of Negro because y'all hear the word Negro and y'all be thinking ancient times, like this shit wasn't relevant for today. Than it does the Negro. Sorry, Dr. Woodson, this stuff was irrelevant for today. Does others so much more good than it does the black person, because it has been worked out in conformity to the needs of those who have enslaved and oppressed weaker peoples. The philosophy and ethics resulting from our education system have justified slavery, peonage, segregation, and lynching. The oppressor has the right to exploit, handicap, and kill the oppressed. Negroes daily educated, black folks daily educated in the tenets of such a religion of the strong, have accepted the status of the weak as divinely ordained. And I will remind all of you, Dr. Yaba Blay came on this show and reminded us of what happens when your God is white. When your God is white. Dr. Carter G. Woodson goes on to say, hold on, let me get it. No systemic effort towards change is possible, for taught the same economics, history, philosophy, literature, and religion, which have established the present code of white supremacist morals. That's my editorialization. The black man's mind, the black person's mind, has been brought under the control of the oppressor. When you control a person's thinking, you don't have to worry about their actions. You don't have to tell them to go here, go yonder. He will find their proper place and stand in it. You don't need to send them to the back door. They will go without being told. If there is no back door, they will cut one out for their special benefit. Their education makes it necessary. The Negro, thus educated, is a hopeless liability of the race, which means you ain't just an existing part of the race. You are costing us. When you are thus educated and when you move in such a way that your anti-blackness is your determining factor, when you move in such a way in a black body that prizes whiteness, you are a detriment to us. And we got to get rid of detriments. They either got to heal or they got to go. Either got to heal or they got to go. Dr. Hudson, I know that was we got a whole series of questions, but now I'm going to come to you.
We don't have time. Y'all act like we got time.
I want to this is a lot of labor. What Dr. Apara just said. It's a lot. This is a meaty conversation. How can I have this conversation and impact policy when Ron DeSantis is banning this type of discussion? Y'all might not even be able to hear this discussion on Sirius airwaves any much longer by the time folks like he get their hand of it. How do we explain this to people? How do white people, when they're being extraordinarily obtuse, and black people who are undereducated about these issues, when they seem surprised at how vicious this particular murder was, right? Now it's not even, I heard white commenters talking about the Tyre Nichols lynching, the brutality, the bestiality, just the degradation, the anti-humanity. I'm like, y'all don't never say that when it's white cops, like, but all of a sudden it's black people doing it, and now police violence is evil and brutal. What say you, Dr. Hudson?
Oh my God, that's their gotcha moment. They can't wait to pull a gotcha. See, black on black crime. What about Chicago? Y'all always killing each other. Listen to the rap music. You violent. That's all they ever do. They can't wait to get that gotcha moment going, because in their mind, the whole construct of our country, everything that we're going through now with critical race theory, all of that, we have always wanted to bury the sins of white people. They don't want to be transparent about how the system is structured, who it benefits, why it persists, because then we'd have to have a real discussion about what really underlines our culture and our civilization at this point in this world. And honestly, I'm just going to go back to my fatalism for a minute, because this is the kind of shit that makes me hope and pray with everything within me that we blow this planet up, even with me on it, before we find a way to travel in deep space.
Dr. Hudson.
And
you said before we spread all of this?
Throughout the galaxy. We have no business in space. That's tangent, but still, it's like, for us, I don't see how we unravel this. We can't even have an honest conversation about any of it. And white people are always, I don't know if you ever feel this way, but sometimes when I have these discussions, even with people that I think I care about and care about me, like, I don't know, I still feel like there's like a glint in their eye, almost like they're savoring the fact that I'm frustrated, that they don't understand. Do you know what I mean? Like, the difference, the nuance. I think for them, it's always just going to be a gotcha. But the problem with that is that it's a throwaway for them. It's like, see, they do it too. There's no problem, with the police. And it's like, there's this, I feel an urge to be like, it's really about the badge and being blue. And it's like, as long as you're behind that, you feel like you're protected or whatever. But even that's too simplistic, because there's so many levels. And if you think about how in these instances, even with this one, I mean, you happen to have a Black police chief as well, but this accountability is so swift that you start to think, okay, well, why don't we Johnny on the spot call white cops murderers? Why don't they get arrested the next day and not 8 days later or 17 days later after riots go on forever? And there's a reason for that too. I think it's just so much easier than to paint them as these outcast, lone wolf, violent Negroes who just, went wild on somebody. Like, that's not their culture. The name of the unit was the Scorpion Unit. Okay. What do Scorpions do? Do Scorpions like peacefully detain people? Hell no.
And that's why, Dr. Hudson, that's why, again, we talk about these systems of oppression and violence as systems and structures, that it doesn't matter about the body. Whether you're a white-bodied cop, a black-bodied cop, every kind of sort of any anti-black brutality incidents we know, when you see the whole range of people involved, it's a rainbow. You see there's this brother over here, there's an Asian cop over here, there's a, we know with George Floyd, right? There was a couple, they were, Asian American, and, so again, it's like, okay, the body is the tool or the vessel, but we're talking about systems and structures. And that's why we got to listen to the abolitionists, because at some point I just become convinced that, I'm sorry, we can't reform this shit. Something that came out of slave patrols. Literally, American policing is the modern, just like slave patrol. When they say to protect and serve, is to protect land and property and serve the landowners and the property owners. That is white, cishet, able-bodied men and the people associated with them. That is who they're protecting and serving, not the rest of us. And so, to be very clear, that you have a system, an institution that came out of, it is literally but just like looks, is wearing 2023 clothing and vehicles, but the mindset and the approach and the culture and the ideology and the philosophy and the engine of it is basically rooted in slave patrolling. And so I don't believe anymore that we can, quote, reform that. We just need a newness in the system, and because again, it is not about the personal. And that's why, to your point, I have no, okay, there is a uniqueness to the fact that, okay, there are Black police officers, and we could talk about internalized anti-Blackness and what that mechanism is, but it doesn't detract from the fact that, but they are also a product of this system. And that's why that's why the Ron DeSantis and the rest of them are so critical in the ways that they are attacking and targeting schooling, and because they don't want you to know the structure and the system. What is critical race theory? Except, you got laws that says, okay, to kill Black people. Like, if I was to make it like super, like simple for the simplest, like, you got policies and laws that say Black people ain't human. So go do what you do in terms of housing, in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of this, that, and the third, because they're human. So it's okay to not give them the
poison their water,
poison their air. Build that factory on top of their house. Like, sure,
why not? Who cares? I don't care.
So that's all it is. So no, we don't want y'all to know that and then vote differently. Like, no. So of course, get it out of the school, get it out of church, get it out of the ear. They are targeting what really ultimately counts, because they know that this is systemic and structural ultimately. And yes, individuals, people uphold the system and structures through their decisions and behaviors, actions and attitudes and ideas, but it is all of those things working together. So I don't even allow the conversation to get, but they're Black, and so what? It is still white supremacy, anti-Blackness. Yes, they were the vehicle, and yes, we can talk about internalized that, this, and the third, but we still got to talk about them structures, because that is what was manifesting through these individuals. And just so I don't forget, because I want to always give your audience correct information, the quote I was seeking to that I was referencing earlier is from the one and only Dr. John Henrik Clarke. John Henrik Clarke. And he says, first of all, you just want to know this ancestor, because everything that fell out of his mouth was straight fire. But this quote is, to control a people, I'm quoting, to control a people, you must first control what they think about themselves and how they regard their history and culture. And when your conqueror makes you ashamed of your culture and your history, he needs no prison walls and no chains to hold you. And it pretty much beautifully dovetails, Sister Lurie, in your quote, which, please get me that citation, because that was fire.
Yes.
It beautifully just pretty much supports exactly what you're saying, and that's what we saw here in Memphis and what we see every day in different sectors of society.
Let's pause here, because I want to introduce the concept of class. And the reason I'm asking about class here, particularly within the Black context, because you said, Dr. Opara, that yes, Black people are in these systems, upholding them through the decision making, through the thoughts, through the ways that they engage with the systems. But let's talk about Black gatekeepers. Let's talk about Black translators for these systems, because, there are a number of Black mayors right now. The executive director, or our founding executive director at the Center for Law and Social Justice, she and I were texting this morning where I work when I'm not on these airwaves. And she was talking about some of her criticisms and how angry she is now that she's in retirement. She ain't retired, but now she's talking about some of her criticisms, because she said this Scorpion unit How is that any different than the black mayor of New York City bringing back the same SWAT cop squads that were responsible for Sean Bell, for Amadou Diallo, for Eric Garner, bringing back the very same units that black activists and abolitionists had gotten rid of under non-black administrations? But we have black leaders who are also, when you are a part of a particular element of the class that is supporting this system, who can also play a part, even if they're not down on the street doing the dirty work of what we saw happening with those officers. Can we talk about the fact that we have black people in positions of power who are holding up these systems? And I said this when we had our announcement of our new chief of police here in New York City. It was a black woman, and it was a beautiful moment for representation. But I'm reminded of one of the hood medicine doctors who's come on here and said, representation matters for what? No, I'm sorry. It was Dr. Sarah Webb. She also said, what representation doesn't just matter in the absence of anything else. It matters for what? And if you are, as a representative in a black body, upholding and empowering the very anti-black systems that are perpetuating harm and anti-blackness against your people, don't we have to deal with that as well, Dr. Hudson? And then do you, Dr. Opara?
I mean, yes.
I don't know why you're laughing.
I mean,
but she just saw Dr. Opara's face.
Today. I'm gonna let Dr. Opara go first, actually, because I want to hear.
Go ahead, Dr. Opara. What would you like to say?
Dr. Hudson, Sister Lurie, absolutely. Again, so what we're doing now is that we're going deeper. It's like an onion. We're peeling the layers. And so when we talk about internalized anti-blackness and then it being expressed as a vehicle of white supremacy and the structural white supremacy, the structural anti-blackness, what are the many ways that can look like? And so now we're talking about the fact that, the policing system, or the system of policing and criminal justice and law enforcement, is not just those people on the front line. Now let's look at leadership. Now let's look at the mayor. Now let's look at all the pieces, all the members of the ecosystem that constitute the criminal justice system and law enforcement inside of that, right? And what are the roles, again, as I said before, that we can perpetuate when we are not doing the internalized work and the work of the deconditioning, unlearning, and then relearning of a better way of being that is grounded in the beauty of blackness and strength and power and value of blackness and all the things that we're supposed to be per our ancestors, right? That we will perpetuate these systems depending on the roles that we play in society. And so, yes, if you're a police chief, if you're a mayor, if you're a governor, if you're the goddamn president, whatever role, and again, even going the other way, if you're a bus driver, if you are, in Kroger's cashier, a librarian, or stay-at-home parent raising them kids, whatever, choir director, a pastor, whatever role you are in society, you will be perpetuating it through the powers that are made available to you by the system. And so, yes, we do see folks in positions of mayorship, in positions of police chieftaincy, in whatever positions they are, also playing their role. Now, no, they're not at the front lines hitting, tasing, shooting, but they are, again, through the decisions allowed them through their position that they've been afforded, maintaining through silence and inaction, as well as through express action and and their vocals. So again, it can look in all kinds of ways. That's why I brought in a doctor, a teacher, whatever you are, you can maintain the system through your action and inaction and through your silence and words. And the last thought I will offer is I love the powerful king that said that about representation for what. This is why I reject everything with the title DEI. I hate that term. Like, please don't bring it near me. What the hell is that? DEI. What is that? What is diversity without justice? What is equity without justice? What is inclusion or inclusivity without justice? And then what is justice without truth? What are you talking about? People into the police system. That's why we have the shit we have today. You did not abolish the structures and systems of violence and oppression inside the system. What you wanted to do is diversify. Okay, now you brought the people in, and what did you do? You taught them your ways, and now they're out here expressing your ways. That's what happens when we don't have the gift of critical thinking, critical analysis, and critical action, and structural competency meaning the ability to engage with systems. We don't have systems thinking. We don't understand those invisible, insidious forces and dynamics that produce the overt actions and symptoms that really point to an underlying pathology or disease, which is racism, anti-blackness, and white supremacy, right? So when you have a people that are not trained like this, then of course you are acting out in these things. And then you bring folks in, they have, again, they're skin folk, but they don't act like kin folk. They are brought in there to put the loudmouth Black folks, to quiet them down and placate them, right? While their actions and inactions, you have to be careful. It's not just what you do, but also what you choose not to do that upholds the system of violence and oppression. So a representation for what? I don't just want a Black person there in that seat, on that table, in that position, in that hall, whatever. It's what is that Black person representing? What are you committing yourself to uphold each and every day? Or is it, again, a self-centered, self-driven, approach that ignores the fact that Ubuntu, I am because we are. You are who you are because we are. I will not be here. None of us will be here. But them ancestors that work together hand in hand sacrificially for us to be here on SiriusXM on this Monday morning Eastern Standard Time, right? Like, we would not be here but for the collective, particularly the women and femmes, the people with disabilities, Black folks, Black queer folks, all of us working together to make sure that we all survive. We can't survive alone. And part of, I think, and I'll end on this thought, the tool and weaponry of white supremacy and anti-Blackness is the tool and weaponry of selfishness and self-centeredness. So for you to think that it is on your own bearings alone for you to survive, it doesn't. It has never been that way. It is not that way and will never be. We survive and thrive together. If we don't do it together, forget about it. And so this is, I think, one of the key pieces that inform, I think, the dynamics we're seeing when you look at, again, these other positions you just listed, and the Black folks that gatekeep in those positions. They have been told a whole story, a whole narrative that they've internalized, and until they return to the source of who they are, why they are, how they are. Yes, they will continue to function in this way, but it is deeper. It's so much deeper than just like, yeah, this person is this Uncle Tom. No, there is a complex history that is undergirding the ways in which they are acting what they're acting now. And we need to be clear about that so that we can build effective strategies to make that change that is necessary. Dr. Hudson, what are your...
Go to commercial break. Wait, before we go to... we got to go to commercial break. And as we go to commercial break, I want us to have these three thoughts. If I am the head of Satan's hordes, the military, if I'm the head of Satan's minions, and I am diversifying, and I'm using this Satan because we understand Satan, it raises up a particular resonance for us. So if I'm in charge of Satan's minions, and my goal is to diversify the minionhood, and I bring in diverse minions, we still working for Satan. Like, the goal is to still wreak havoc across the earth. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a lot of us have become what we call gatekeepers to these spaces, where we learn how to adapt and to adjust and speak in a way that is going to allow us to maintain some sentience here. But I want us to ask ourselves, are you really a gatekeeper, or are you a security guard for the white man's institutions that you have been brought into to give the appearance of transparency? I remember we went to Jamaica to get married, and I was going to my mother's home country. I was so excited, and I kept seeing all these Black store owners who I thought were store owners outside on this particular marketing strip that we were on. And I realized, oh, y'all ain't the store owner. It's the non-Black, non-Jamaicans inside that own the store. You were just hired and put outside a store in the land that you are from to bring me in, not me not knowing that this money was not going to the Black hand. So are you a gatekeeper, or are you really a security guard? And there is this concept that we understand well with gender. And I saw it just referenced a moment ago in the chat. With gender, what we have seen where women have been the first to integrate into some of these spaces. And there's this idea that women in these spaces become like men. They're more mannish than men. They're so hard. They're so crusty. They become better men than the men because they got to make it in these spaces. Yeah. Query whether something also happens to us as Black people going into these spaces. We adopt those systems, we adopt those structures, and we become better at enforcing the rules of the master's house than we do even our own. Heading into a commercial break, much more to come on the Lurie Daniel Favors Show. We'll be right back after this.